Here's part 1 of your story, written in simple and basic English and third-person style. Without headings, it's designed to be engaging while sticking to the requested tone and length. Logan Bennett stood at the edge of the drop zone, staring out at the endless expanse of white. The ground beneath his boots was frozen solid, a jagged sheet of ice that stretched as far as the eye could see. Above him, the sky was a pale gray, almost blending into the horizon where land met air. A biting wind howled around him, tugging at his thermal suit and making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady himself. This wasn't just another survival test, it was something bigger. Behind him, the Zalari shuttle hummed softly, its sleek silver surface glinting faintly under the dim light of Glacis 7's distant sun. Logan glanced over his shoulder for a moment, catching sight of the aliens watching him through their large, dark eyes. They were tall, taller than any human, with thin limbs and skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Their expressions were unreadable, but Logan didn't need to see their faces to know what they thought of him. To them, he was nothing more than an experiment, a fragile little creature who couldn't possibly endure the harshness of their world. 10 minutes, one of the Zalari said, its voice smooth and cold, like water trickling over stone. Logan turned back toward the icy wasteland ahead. Prove you can survive here, or leave this place forever. Logan nodded once, not bothering to respond. Words wouldn't mean much now. Instead, he tightened the straps on his backpack, checked the seals on his gloves, and adjusted the scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. His gear wasn't fancy, just a standard issue thermal suit, a few basic tools, and some emergency supplies, but it was enough. Or so he hoped. He'd spent years working as a park ranger in Alaska, braving blizzards and sub-zero temperatures. Back then, people called him crazy for choosing such a lonely job. But Logan had always felt more alive when the stakes were high. There was something about the raw power of nature that made him feel small yet invincible all at once. Now, standing here on this alien ice world, he realized those years of experience might be the only thing keeping him alive. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. As soon as the timer hit 0, the Zalari shuttle lifted off, leaving Logan alone in the vast emptiness. For a second, he let himself take it all in, the silence, the cold, the sheer enormity of the task ahead. Then, shaking off the momentary awe, he got to work. Survival wasn't about standing still. It was about moving forward. The first thing Logan did was assess the terrain. The trial zone was a flat, featureless plain, broken only by occasional ridges of packed snow and ice. In the distance, he spotted a cluster of jagged rocks jutting out from the ground. That would be his goal, to reach those rocks before the worst of the weather hit. Shelter was key, even if it was just partial cover from the wind. Taking careful steps, Logan started walking. Each step sank slightly into the snow, and the cold seeped through the soles of his boots. Despite the insulation, he kept his movements deliberate, conserving energy. Out here, every calorie counted. Every decision mattered. Above him, cameras floated silently, broadcasting his progress to an audience scattered across the galaxy. Logan knew the whole universe was watching, but he tried not to think about it. Focusing on the crowd wouldn't help him stay alive. What mattered was right here, right now. The wind whipping against his face, the frost forming on his visor, the rhythmic crunch of his boots against the snow. After 10 minutes of steady hiking, Logan reached the rocky outcrop. Up close, the formations looked even sharper than they had from afar, their edges glittering like shattered glass. He crouched down behind one of the larger boulders, using it to shield himself from the wind. Pulling off a glove, he wiped the frost from his visor with a bare hand, ignoring the sting of the cold against his skin. Once his vision cleared, he pulled out a small compass from his pocket and checked his bearings. Glacis 7's magnetic field was weak, but the compass still worked well enough to give him a general direction. Logan marked the spot on his mental map, noting the position of the monolith that marked the finish line. He'd have to cross open ground again to reach it, but at least he had a plan. As he sat there catching his breath, Logan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. Why had he volunteered for this? It wasn't fame or fortune that drove him, no. It was something deeper, a belief that humanity deserved a chance to prove itself. Too often, other species dismissed humans as weak, short-lived, insignificant. But Logan knew better. Humans weren't perfect, sure, but they had something no amount of technology or evolution could replicate: grit, pure, stubborn determination. A sudden gust of wind snapped him out of his thoughts. Logan stood up, brushing snow off his shoulders. He couldn't afford to dwell on philosophy not when the clock was ticking. With renewed focus, he adjusted his pack and stepped back out onto the icy plain. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. But Logan wasn't afraid. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. Instead, he embraced the challenge, letting the cold fuel his resolve. 10 minutes, that was all he needed. 10 minutes to show the universe what humans were made of. And Logan, Bennett wasn't about to fail. Let me know if you'd like me to continue writing part 2 or format this into a separate document. Here's part to of your story, written in simple and basic English and third-person style. Without headings, it continues the narrative seamlessly from part 1. The wind picked up as Logan stepped away from the rocky outcrop, his sharp howl cutting through the silence like a knife. Each gust felt heavier than the last, pushing against him with relentless force. The temperature had dropped even further, and frost began to creep along the edges of his visor again. Logan wiped it clean with a gloved hand, squinting into the distance. The open plain stretched ahead, barren and unforgiving, but he couldn't afford to hesitate. Every second counted. Logan glanced at the small timer clipped to his wrist, a crude device compared to the advanced tech used by the Zalari, but reliable enough for his needs. 5 minutes had passed since the trial began. That left him 5 more to go. His breath came in short bursts, visible clouds forming and vanishing almost instantly in the frigid air. He reminded himself to breathe deeply to keep his body steady. Panic wouldn't help him here. Staying calm was his greatest weapon. As he trudged forward, Logan noticed something strange about the snow beneath his feet. It wasn't just flat and solid, it shifted slightly with each step, creaking faintly under his weight. He paused, crouching down to examine it closer. Running his gloved fingers over the surface, he realized the ice was thinner than it looked. Below it, dark shapes moved, shadows swirling lazily in the depths. Whatever they weren't natural formations, fissures, Logan muttered to himself, standing back up. Or worse. He adjusted his course, steering clear of the unstable patches. Falling through the ice would mean instant death or worse, being trapped alive in freezing water until hypothermia claimed him. Either way, it wasn't an option. Carefully, he scanned the ground ahead, searching for safer paths. The monolith marking the finish line was still far away, but he could see it now, a towering spire of jagged ice shimmering faintly in the dim light. It seemed impossibly distant, yet Logan refused to let doubt creep in. Back at the command station, Lisa Martinez sat hunched over her console, watching the live feed intently. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her brow furrowed as she tracked Logan's progress. On screen, the cameras followed him closely, capturing every detail of his struggle against the elements. She clenched her fist nervously, leaning closer to the monitor. "You've got this, Logan," she whispered under her breath, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Just keep moving." Lisa wasn't just a communications officer, she was Logan's friend, someone who believed in him when others doubted. When the Zalari issued their challenge, many dismissed it as impossible, but not Lisa. She'd seen Logan survive situations that would break most people. If anyone could pull this off, it was him. Meanwhile, the Zalari observers remained impassive, their expressions unreadable. They stood clustered around a large holographic display showing Logan's location and vitals. One of them, taller than the rest, tilted its head slightly, studying the readings with quiet curiosity. Its name was Vectal, a junior member of the council tasked with monitoring the trial. While the others seemed confident in humanity's inevitable failure, Vectal found itself intrigued. Logan's movements were methodical, deliberate. There was no sign of panic or despair, only determination. "He is adapting," Vectal observed. Aloud, its voice smooth and measured. Most species would have succumbed to fear by now. Another Zalari turned to look at Vectal, its metallic eyes narrowing slightly. "Fear is irrelevant. Survival is what matters. And survival requires strength beyond what humans possess." Vectal said nothing, returning its gaze to the screen. Perhaps its fellow council members were right. Perhaps Logan was simply delaying the inevitable. Yet something about his resilience stirred a flicker of uncertainty within Vectal, a question it couldn't quite articulate. Out on the ice, Logan pressed onward, his muscles burning with exertion. The wind grew fiercer, whipping snow into his face and stinging his exposed skin. He pulled his scarf tighter, tucking it securely over his nose and mouth. Each step required more effort than the last, but he pushed through the fatigue, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing. In out, in out. It was a mantra, a reminder that he was still alive, still fighting. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed across the plain. Logan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Turning slowly, he saw jagged fissures splitting the ice just a few feet behind him. Steam rose from the gap, carrying with it the faint smell of sulfur. Whatever lay beneath the surface was waking up. Logan didn't wait to find out what it was. Without hesitation, he broke into a run, his boots crunching against the snow. The fissures spread rapidly, branching outward like lightning across the ice. Chunks of frozen earth broke loose, plunging into the abyss below. Logan zigzagged wildly, dodging falling debris and trying to stay ahead of the collapse. His lungs burned and his legs screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. Not until he reached firmer ground. When the rumbling finally subsided, Logan collapsed onto his knees, gasping for air. He looked back at the chasm he'd narrowly escaped, its edges glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Whatever lived down there, it wasn't friendly. Shaking his head, Logan forced himself to stand. Time was running out, and he couldn't afford distractions. He checked his timer again. 7 minutes had passed, 3 minutes left. With renewed urgency, Logan resumed his trek toward the monolith. The icy winds continued to batter him, but he ignored them, focusing instead on the path ahead. As he drew closer to the finish line, he spotted something unexpected, a group of small, sleek drones hovering near the base of the spire. They buzzed softly, their lenses flashing as they recorded his approach. Logan frowned, recognizing them as Zalari surveillance units. Clearly, the aliens wanted a front-row seat to his final moments. Not today, Logan muttered, gripping the strap of his backpack tightly. He wasn't going to let them win, not yet. Behind the scenes, Lisa watched anxiously as the drones closed in on Logan. Her fingers hovered over the controls, ready to intervene if necessary. But she knew better than to interfere. This was Logan's fight, and he had to finish it on his own terms. Still, she couldn't shake the tension coiling in her chest. "Come on, Logan," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You're almost there." On the alien ship, Vectal leaned forward slightly. Its interest peaked. The human was closer to the monolith than anyone had anticipated. Could he actually make it? The thought sent a ripple of unease through the young Zalari. For centuries, the trial zone had been a symbol of their superiority, a testament to the harshness of Glacis 7. If Logan succeeded, it would challenge everything they believed about themselves and about humanity. Logan didn't know any of this as he trudged forward, one heavy step at a time. All he knew was the cold biting at his skin, the ache in his legs, and the resolve burning in his chest. The monolith loomed larger now, its jagged peaks rising high above the frozen plain. Just a little farther, he could feel that the end was within reach. But Glacis 7 wasn't done testing him yet. A sudden gust of wind slammed into Logan with brutal force, nearly knocking him off his feet. He stumbled, catching himself on one knee before regaining his balance. Snow swirled violently around him, reducing visibility to almost nothing. A whiteout storm was forming, swallowing the landscape in a blinding haze. Logan gritted his teeth, refusing to yield. Pulling his scarf tighter, he lowered his head and pushed forward, using the compass to guide him through the chaos. The storm raged on, battering him relentlessly. But he kept moving. Step by step, he fought his way through the tempest, driven by sheer willpower. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the storm began to subside. Logan blinked away the frost clinging to his eyelashes and looked up. Through the swirling snow, he saw the monolith, towering above him like a beacon of hope. He was close. So close. 2 minutes left. Logan summoned every ounce of strength he had left, forcing his weary body to move faster. His boots crunched against the snow, each step bringing him closer to victory. The cameras followed his every move, broadcasting his struggle to the galaxy. Millions of beings watched in awe as the lone human defied the odds, proving that resilience wasn't measured by size or strength but by heart. And Logan Bennett had plenty of heart. Let me know if you'd like me to continue writing part 3 or format this into a separate document. Here's ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** in third-person style. Without headings, it continues seamlessly from part 2. The monolith loomed ahead, its jagged surface glinting faintly in the weak light. Logan's breath came in short, ragged burst as he pushed himself forward, his legs trembling with exhaustion. The storm had eased slightly, but the wind still howled around him, biting at his face and hands despite the layers of insulation. Frost clung to his visor, forcing him to wipe it away repeatedly. Every movement felt like a battle, every step an act of defiance against the planet itself. Logan checked his timer again. 1 minute and 30 seconds left. He was almost there, but the final stretch seemed endless. The open plain stretched between him and the monolith, a flat expanse of ice that offered no cover from the wind or the cold. His muscles burned with fatigue and his mind screamed at him to stop, to rest, to give up. But Logan ignored it. He'd come too far to quit now. As he drew closer, something moved in the corner of his vision. At first, he thought it was just the shifting snow, a trick of the light, but then he saw it clearly, a dark shape sliding across the ice. Low to the ground and impossibly fast. Logan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Another shape appeared, then another, until half a dozen creatures surrounded him, their sleek bodies blending seamlessly with the shadows. The predators were unlike anything Logan had ever seen. They were long and sinewy, with smooth, reflective hides that shimmered like oil slicks. Their eyes glowed faintly, twin pinpricks of amber light cutting through the gloom. Sharp claws clicked against the ice as they circled him, their movements fluid and predatory. Logan tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack, his mind racing. These weren't ordinary animals, they were hunters, intelligent and calculating. For a moment, everything went still. The wind died down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Logan stood frozen, his eyes darting between the creatures as they closed in. He knew running wasn't an option, not with so little time left. If he wanted to survive, he'd have to think fast. Reaching into his pack, Logan pulled out a small flare gun. It was one of the few tools he'd been allowed to bring, a last-ditch defense against emergencies. He didn't know if it would work against these alien beasts, but it was all he had. Holding the flare steady, he aimed it at the nearest creature and fired. The flare erupted in a burst of bright red light, illuminating the icy plain. The predators recoiled, their glowing eyes narrowing as they shielded themselves from the glare. Logan didn't wait for them to recover. With the flare still burning, he turned and sprinted toward the monolith, putting as much distance between himself and the creatures as possible. Behind him, the predators hesitated for only a moment before giving chase. Their claws scraped against the ice as they surged forward, their speed unmatched. Logan could hear them closing in, their guttural growls echoing in his ears. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead, but he forced himself to keep moving. The monolith was close now, so close he could almost touch it. Back at the command station, Lisa Martinez watched the live feed with growing anxiety. Her hands gripped the edge of her console tightly, her knuckles white. On screen, Logan was running for his life, the alien predators hot on his heels. She clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to shout at the screen. "Come on, Logan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're almost there." On the Zalari ship, the council members observed the scene with detached interest. To them, this was merely part of the trial, a test of survival against not only the elements, but also Galaxy 7's native wildlife. Most species wouldn't have lasted this long. Yet Logan pressed on, refusing to yield even when fate was certain. Death. Vek leaned forward slightly, its metallic eyes fixed on the humans struggling below. There was something remarkable about Logan's determination, something Vectal couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just physical strength or skill, it was something deeper, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. For the first time, Vectal began to doubt the Council's assumptions about humanity. Perhaps these fragile beings were more resilient than anyone had realized. Out on the ice, Logan reached the base of the monolith and spun around, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The predators slowed as they approached, their glowing eyes locked onto him. They were cautious now, wary of the flare that had driven them back moments ago. Logan held the spent flare gun tightly, knowing it was useless now, but unwilling to let go of it. His mind raced, searching for a way out. Then he noticed something, a narrow crevice in the side of the monolith, just wide enough for him to squeeze through. Without hesitation, Logan scrambled toward it, ducking inside just as the predators lunged. The creatures snarled in frustration, pacing outside the crevice but unable to follow him. Logan pressed himself against the icy wall, his heart pounding as he listened to their growls fade into the distance. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, letting his head fall back against the ice. The crevice was dark and cold, but it was safe for now. Logan glanced at his timer. 45 seconds left. He still had to plant the flag and stand upright for the final 30 seconds. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself to his feet and stepped back out into the open. The predators were gone, driven away by the flare or simply losing interest. Logan didn't waste time wondering why. Instead, he grabbed the human flag from his pack, a simple piece of fabric marked with Earth's insignia, and jammed it into the snow. At the base of the monolith, the action was symbolic, a declaration of humanity's resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. With the flag planted, Logan straightened up, squaring his shoulders as he faced the cameras hovering nearby. His body trembled with exhaustion, and frost coated his suit, but he stood tall, his expression resolute. The timer ticked down. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1. When the clock hit 0, Logan exhaled sharply, letting the tension drain from his body. He'd done it. Against all odds, he'd survived the trial zone, high above The Zalari observers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. None of them had expected this outcome. Even Vectal seemed surprised, though it quickly masked its reaction behind its usual stoic demeanor. Humanity had proven itself capable of enduring what many considered impossible. Lisa let out a shaky breath, tears welling up in her eyes as she watched Logan standing there, battered but unbroken. She leaned back in her chair, overcome with relief. "He did it," she murmured, a smile breaking across her face. "He actually did it." Logan didn't celebrate. Instead, he sank to his knees, his strength finally giving out. His vision blurred, and his limbs felt like they were made of stone. The cold seeped into his bones, relentless and unforgiving. He knew help was coming. The Zalari shuttle would retrieve him soon, but for now, all he could do was sit there and let the enormity of what he'd accomplished wash over him. In that moment, Logan realized something important. This wasn't just about proving humanity's worth to the galaxy. It was about proving it to themselves. Humans weren't perfect, and they never would be. But they had something special, a stubborn refusal to give up, no matter how dire the circumstances. And sometimes that was enough. As the Zalari shuttle descended from the sky, its engines humming softly, Logan looked up at the stars twinkling faintly above him. Somewhere out there, billions of people were watching, cheering for him. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself a small, weary smile. "We showed them," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We showed them what we're made of." And with that, Logan Bennett collapsed into the snow, his mission complete. Let me know if you'd like me to continue writing part 4 or format this into a separate document. Here's part for of your story, written in simple and basic English and third-person style. Without headings, it continues the narrative seamlessly from part 3. The Zalari shuttle landed softly on the ice, its sleek silver frame gleaming faintly under the dim light. A ramp extended downward, and 2 alien figures stepped out, their movements fluid and precise. Logan, still kneeling in the snow, lifted his head weakly as they approached. His vision was blurry, but he could make out their shimmering forms against the pale gray sky. They didn't speak, not to him, at least, but one of them gestured for him to stand. Logan tried to push himself up, but his body refused to cooperate. Every muscle ached, and the cold had seeped so deeply into his bones that even breathing felt like an effort. One of the Zalari crouched beside him, studying him with those large, unreadable eyes. For a moment, Logan wondered if they'd leave him there, let the ice claim him after everything he'd done. But then the alien reached out, its thin fingers wrapping around Logan's arm, and pulled him to his feet. With their help, Logan stumbled onto the shuttle. The interior was warm, almost uncomfortably so after hours in the freezing cold, and brightly lit. He collapsed onto a bench near the wall, leaning heavily against it as heat slowly began to return to his frozen limbs. Frost melted off his suit, pooling around him in tiny droplets. His hands trembled uncontrollably, and he clenched them into fists to steady them. One of the Zalari moved to a console at the front of the shuttle, tapping commands into its glowing interface. The engines hummed to life, and the ship lifted off, leaving the icy wasteland behind. Logan closed his eyes, letting the warmth soak into his skin. He didn't care where they were taking him. All that mattered was that he'd survived. He'd proven humanity's resilience not just to the Zalari, but to himself. Back at the command station, Lisa Martinez watched the live feed intently as the shuttle ascended into the sky. Her heart raced as she saw Logan being helped aboard, his body limp but alive. Relief washed over her like a tidal wave, and she slumped back in her chair, letting out a shaky laugh. "You did it, Logan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." She glanced at the other humans in the room, scientists, diplomats, engineers, all of them staring at the screen in stunned silence. No one had expected this outcome. Humanity had been given a challenge designed to humiliate them, to prove their inferiority. Instead, Logan had turned it into a triumph. Lisa couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just a victory for Logan, it was a victory for everyone who believed in the strength of ordinary people. On the Zalari ship, Vectal stood apart from the others, observing quietly as the shuttle docked and Logan was brought aboard. The human looked frail now, his defiance replaced by exhaustion. Yet Vectal couldn't shake the image of him standing tall beneath the monolith, battered but unbroken. There was something admirable about that kind of determination, something Vectal hadn't encountered before. "Humans are unexpected," Vectal murmured to itself, tilting its head slightly. Its fellow council members ignored the comment, to focus on analyzing the trial results. To them, Logan's survival was an anomaly, a fluke that didn't change the broader perception of humanity's weaknesses. But Vectal wasn't so sure anymore. Logan was taken to a medical bay, where Zalari technicians worked quickly to stabilize him. They removed his frost-covered suit and wrapped him in heated blankets, monitoring his vitals closely. At first, Logan didn't resist. He was too tired to fight, but as sensation returned to his extremities, pain followed. His fingers throbbed, and his toes burned as though they were on fire. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. Pain was temporary, giving up was permanent. After what felt like hours, the pain began to subside, replaced by a dull ache. Logan opened his eyes, blinking against the bright lights overhead. The Zalari technicians hovered nearby, their movements efficient and impersonal. One of them handed him a small cup, filled with a clear liquid. Logan stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to trust them. But thirst outweighed caution, and he drank it slowly, savoring the warmth as it slid down his throat. When he finished, Logan sat up cautiously, testing his strength. His legs still felt weak, but they held his weight when he stood. The Zalari didn't stop him, though they kept a close watch. Logan glanced around the room, taking in the unfamiliar technology and sterile environment. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. But he also knew he couldn't leave, not yet. A door slid open, and a group of Zalari entered, their metallic forms shimmering faintly in the light. Logan recognized one of them, the taller one who had spoken to him earlier. It stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on him. "You have completed the trial," it said, its voice smooth and measured. "Few species survive the trial zone, fewer still endure predators." Logan nodded slowly, meeting its gaze. "I told you we could handle it." The Zalari tilted its head slightly as though considering his words. "Your species is resilient. We underestimated you." Logan didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, his expression calm but resolute. After a moment, he spoke again. "We're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we don't give up. That's what makes us strong." The Zalari studied him for a long moment before turning to its companions. They exchanged quiet murmurs, their language flowing like water over stone. Logan couldn't understand the words, but he could sense the shift in their demeanor. Something had changed. Finally, the lead Zalari turned back to him. "Glacis 7 will remain neutral territory. However, your species has earned our respect. You may join the Galactic Council as equals." Logan felt a surge of pride, but he kept his emotions in check. Nodding once, he said simply, "Thank you." The Zalari didn't linger. They left the room, their footsteps silent on the metal floor. Logan sank back onto the bench, exhaling sharply. He'd expected resistance, maybe even hostility. Instead, he'd been met with acknowledgement, grudging, perhaps, but genuine nonetheless. It was more than he'd hoped for. Lisa received the news moments later, her console lighting up with updates from the Zalari ship. She read the message twice, her eyes widening with each word. Humanity had earned a seat at the galactic table. It was a monumental achievement, one that would change the course of history. And it had all started with Logan Bennett. Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes as she leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. She wanted to call Logan, to tell him how proud she was, but she knew he needed time to recover. Instead, she sent a brief message. "You did it. We're all watching. Thank you." Logan received the message later, after being escorted back to the human delegation's quarters. He sat alone in a small room, staring at the screen of a borrowed device. Lisa's words were simple, but they carried weight. For the first time in hours, Logan allowed himself to feel the enormity of what he'd accomplished. He wasn't just a park ranger or a survival trainer anymore. He was a symbol of hope, proof that humanity could rise to any challenge. But Logan didn't want fame or recognition. As far as he was concerned, he'd done his job. Now, it was time to go home. When the Zalari finally released him, Logan boarded a transport ship bound for Earth. The journey took days, but he spent most of it asleep, his body still recovering from the ordeal. When he woke, he found himself staring out a viewport at the vastness of space. Stars stretched endlessly before him, their light twinkling faintly against the darkness. Somewhere out there, Glacis 7 orbited silently, a frozen world that had tested him to his limits. Logan smiled faintly, leaning back in his seat. He'd faced death and won, not because he was stronger or faster than anyone else, but because he'd refused to quit. That was humanity's greatest strength, the ability to endure, to adapt, to keep moving forward no matter what. As the transport ship neared Earth, Logan thought about what came next. The galaxy had changed, and so had he. But some things would always stay the same. Humanity's spirit, its stubborn refusal to give up, that would never fade. And neither would Logan Bennett. Let me know if you'd like me to continue writing part 5 or format this into a separate document. Here's part 5 of your story, written in simple and basic English and third-person style, without headings. It continues the narrative seamlessly from Part 4. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing faintly as it pierced the clouds. Logan Bennett sat by the window, staring out at the blue and green planet below. It felt strange to be coming home after everything that had happened. Galaxy 7 was still fresh in his mind, the biting cold, the howling winds, the predators circling him like shadows. He could still feel the frost on his skin, hear the crunch of snow beneath his boots. But now, looking down at Earth's familiar continents and oceans, those memories seemed distant, almost unreal. When the ship landed, Logan stepped off cautiously, his body still stiff from the journey. The air smelled different here, warmer, softer, filled with the scent of grass and soil. He took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs. For the first time in days, he felt grounded, connected to something bigger than himself. A crowd waited for him on the tarmac, scientists, reporters, government officials, all eager to welcome him back. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust toward him. But Logan ignored them. His eyes scanned the group until they landed on Lisa Martinez. She stood near the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed and a small smile playing on her lips. Logan nodded at her, and she nodded back, understanding passing between them without words. Logan didn't stop to talk. Instead, he walked past the crowd, heading straight for a waiting car. Lisa followed close behind, slipping into the passenger seat as the driver pulled away. The reporters shouted questions, but Logan kept his gaze fixed ahead, his expression unreadable. Fame wasn't what he wanted, not now, not ever. What he needed was quiet, time to process everything that had happened. The car drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Finally, Lisa broke the quiet. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Logan glanced at her, then looked away. "I'm alive," he said simply. "That's enough," Lisa nodded, knowing better than to push him. She'd seen this side of Logan before, the quiet, reflective side that came out after a tough mission. He wasn't the kind of person to celebrate victories or dwell on failures. He just kept moving forward, one step at a time. When they reached Logan's cabin in the mountains, he stepped out of the car and stretched, taking in the familiar sight of towering pine trees and snow-capped peaks. This was where he belonged, not in front of cameras or in crowded cities, but here, surrounded by nature. The cabin was small and modest, with wooden walls and a stone chimney. It wasn't much, but it was home. Logan went inside, dropping his bag by the door. The air inside was cool, but welcoming, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke. He lit a fire in the hearth, watching as the flames licked at the logs. Lisa lingered in the doorway, unsure if she should stay or leave. After a moment, Logan gestured for her to come in. "You hungry?" he asked, pulling a pot from the cupboard. Lisa shook her head. "Not really, just glad you're back." Logan nodded, setting the pot aside. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "It's over," he said quietly. "Galaxy 7, the trial, all of it done." Lisa studied him for a moment, then said, "It's not just about Galaxy 7, is it? You showed everyone what humans are capable of. People are talking about you, Logan. They're inspired." Logan frowned slightly, shaking his head. "I didn't do it for them. I did it because someone had to. Because if we don't stand up for ourselves, no one else will." Lisa smiled, faintly, recognizing the stubbornness that made Logan who he was. "Still," she said, "you've given people hope. That's worth something." Logan didn't respond immediately. He turned back to the fire, watching the flames dance. Hope was important, sure, but it wasn't enough on its own. Action mattered more. And Logan knew there was still work to be done on Earth, in the galaxy, everywhere. Later that evening, Lisa left, promising to check in soon. Logan stayed by the fire, letting the warmth seep into his bones. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the stars twinkled faintly in the night sky. He thought about Galaxy 7 again, about the Zalari and their trial zone. They'd underestimated humanity, assuming it was weak and fragile, but Logan had proven them wrong. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge was only beginning. Surviving Galaxy 7 had been hard, but building a future among the stars would be even harder. Humanity wasn't perfect, it never had been, but it had something special: resilience. The ability to adapt, to learn, to grow. Logan believed in that deeply and completely. The next morning, Logan woke early, stepping outside as the sun rose over the mountains. The air was crisp, and the ground was dusted with fresh snow. He grabbed an axe from the shed and began chopping wood, the rhythmic thud of the blade against the log grounding him. This was what he loved: simple, honest work. No cameras, no crowds, just him and the wilderness. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to the future. Humanity had earned a place on the Galactic Council, but earning respect would take more than one victory. It would require patience, humility, and strength. Logan didn't know what role he'd play in that future, if any, but he knew he'd keep doing what he always had: teaching, surviving, enduring. By midday, Logan had finished stacking the wood and decided to take a walk. He wandered through the forest, his boots crunching softly against the snow. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with frost. He paused at a clearing, looking out over the valley below. From here, the world seemed peaceful, untouched by conflict or fear. But Logan knew better. Peace didn't come easily. It had to be fought for, protected, nurtured, and he was ready to fight in whatever way he could. Back at the cabin, Logan found a message waiting for him. It was from the government, thanking him for his service and inviting him to speak at a conference about humanity's role in the galaxy. Logan read the message once, then set it aside. He didn't know if he'd accept the invitation, but he appreciated the gesture. That night, Logan sat by the fire again, staring into the flames. He thought about the Zilari, about Vectal, and the other observers who had watched him struggle against the elements. They'd called humanity fragile, insignificant, but Logan had shown them otherwise. He'd shown them that humans weren't defined by their weaknesses, they were defined by their ability to overcome them. And that was something worth holding onto. In the days that followed, Logan returned to his routine. He chopped wood, tended to the garden, and spent long hours hiking through the forest. Life went on, simple and steady, but every now and then he'd glance up at the stars, remembering the icy wasteland of Glacis 7 and the creatures that had hunted him there. He wasn't afraid of them anymore. If anything, he felt gratitude for the lessons they'd taught him, for the strength they'd forced him to find within himself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Logan climbed to the top of a nearby hill. He stood there, looking up at the sky, the stars shining brightly above him. Somewhere out there, the Zilari were watching, studying humanity's progress. Logan didn't care what they thought anymore. All that mattered was what humanity thought of itself. "We're just people," he murmured, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. "But damn, we're stubborn." With that, Logan turned and headed back down the hill, his footsteps crunching softly against the snow. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and unknowns, but Logan wasn't afraid. He'd faced the worst. Glacis 7 could throw at him and he'd survived. Whatever came next, he'd face it the same way, with grit, determination, and an unshakable belief in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Let me know if you'd like me to continue writing part 6 or format this into a separate document. Here's **************************** part 6 ****** of your story, written in simple and basic English and third-person style, without headings. It concludes the narrative seamlessly from part 5. Weeks passed, and Logan Bennett settled back into his quiet life in the mountains. The world beyond his cabin buzzed with excitement over humanity's newfound place among the stars. But Logan stayed out of it. He didn't watch the news or read the articles about him. Instead, he focused on the things that mattered: chopping wood, tending to his garden, teaching survival skills to a group of young cadets who traveled up from the city every few days. They came eager to learn, inspired by Logan's story, but unaware of how much he disliked talking about it. One morning, as Logan led the cadets through a lesson on building shelters, he noticed one of them struggling. The boy, his name was Sam, was trying to tie a knot, but his fingers fumbled with the rope. Logan walked over and knelt beside him, showing him how to loop and tighten it properly. "You'll get it," Logan said, his voice calm and steady. "It's not about being perfect. It's about keeping going." Sam nodded, his face lighting up when the knot finally held. "Thanks, Mr. Bennett," he said, grinning. Logan smiled faintly and stood, moving on to check the others. Watching the cadet's work reminded him of why he'd taken this path in the first place. Survival wasn't just about enduring the cold or outsmarting predators. It was about teaching others to do the same. Humanity wouldn't thrive in the galaxy by relying on heroes. It would thrive by raising people who could handle whatever came their way. After the lesson ended, Logan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the cadets pack up their gear and head back down the mountain. Lisa Martinez joined him, carrying a thermos of hot coffee. She handed it to him, and he took a sip, letting the warmth spread through his chest. "They're good kids," Lisa said, nodding toward the departing group. "They look up to you." "Don't know why," Logan replied, shaking his head. "I'm just a guy who knows how to stay alive." Lisa chuckled softly. "That's exactly why they look up to you. You showed them and everyone else that humans can handle anything if we put our minds to it." Logan didn't respond immediately. He sipped his coffee again, staring out at the forest. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches creaking softly. He thought about Glacis 7, about the Zalari and their trial zone. He faced death there, stared it down, and refused to blink. But what truly mattered wasn't the trial itself, it was the lessons he'd brought back with him. Survival isn't enough, Logan said after a moment, his voice low. We've got to build something, a future where people don't just survive but thrive. Lisa nodded, understanding what he meant. Humanity had earned its seat at the galactic table, but earning respect would take more than surviving trials. It would require wisdom, patience, and a willingness to listen to the Zalari, to other species, even to each other. Do you think we can do it? Lisa asked, her tone serious for once. Really make something of this? Logan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. We have to try. If we don't, then everything I went through, everything anyone's gone through, it'll all be for nothing. Lisa smiled faintly, reassured by his words. She knew Logan wasn't the kind of person to give up, no matter how tough things got, and maybe that was humanity's greatest strength, not perfection, but persistence. The next day, Logan received another message, this time from Bechtal, the junior Zalari observer who had shown interest during the trial. The message was brief, written in simple language designed to bridge the gap between their species. We underestimated your kind, it read. You are resilient, adaptable. Perhaps there is more to learn from you than we believed. Logan stared at the screen for a long time, his mind racing. He hadn't expected to hear from the Zalari again, let alone Bechtal. After a moment, he typed a reply, keeping it short and honest. Humans aren't perfect, he wrote, but we keep trying. That's what makes us strong. He sent the message and set the device aside, unsure if he'd ever hear back. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the possibility of understanding between two very different species. As the weeks turned into months, Logan continued living his quiet life in the mountains. He taught his cadets, tended his garden, and spent long hours hiking through the forest. But every now and then he'd glance up at the stars, wondering about the galaxy beyond Earth. Somewhere out there, the Zalari were watching, studying humanity's progress. Others might see them as cold, distant beings, but Logan saw something else, curiosity, a desire to understand. One evening, as winter approached, Logan climbed to the top of a hill near his cabin. Snow blanketed the ground, and the air was crisp and still. He stood there, looking up at the sky, the stars shining brightly above him. They seemed so far away, yet somehow close enough to touch. For a moment, Logan allowed himself to imagine the future, where humanity worked alongside other species, learning from them and teaching them in return. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and fear, but Logan believed it was possible. Humans weren't perfect, but they were stubborn, and sometimes that was enough. Turning away from the view, Logan headed back down the hill, his footsteps crunching softly against the snow. When he reached the cabin, he lit a fire in the hearth and sat by the flames, letting the warmth seep into his bones. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Logan didn't know what the future held for him, for humanity, for the galaxy, but he wasn't afraid. He'd faced the worst Glacis 7 could throw at him, and he'd survived. Whatever came next, he'd face it the same way, with grit, determination, and an unshakable belief in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And so, Logan Bennett returned to his quiet life, content to play his small part in a much larger story. He didn't need fame or recognition. All he needed was the knowledge that he'd made a difference. In a universe full of uncertainty, that was enough. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or additional formatting.